Hi everyone, so we're going to be looking into how to create this air quality app, and we can pick a specific location, whatever area you want, and then you can get the different types of air quality levels. So we'll be grabbing the numbers, and then we'll set up all these values. We'll either be grabbing it from OpenWeather API, and some of these hard-coded ones we will be actually setting up in our resources. So we'll set up our own JSON file for it, and I'll be showing you how to set up a MVVM in order to organize our files and folders accordingly. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, we're going to have some sort of mobile device open. And I'm going to be opening up Xcode, so let me search for Xcode. And then I'm just going to make a brand new app, so I'll create a new project, iOS app, and I'll just say air pollution, and then sure, developer resources, and Swift UI and Swift, and everything else is none. And then we'll click next, and I'll just save it on my desktop. That's great. Perfect. So now we have the starter template, and if I click play, and it's just loading right there. You can see it's building. And here we go, we got the starter app. And next thing we're going to do is we're going to go to OpenWeather API. So you can go to openweathermap.org/API, and then we're going to be using the one for, let's go down here, it's the air pollution one. It's free, so it's included in both free and paid subscriptions. So if we go to the API doc, you can see that we're going to be able to grab some numbers and statistics here that we could grab. And the most important thing is that we have our URL, and we're going to have to put the latitude and longitude for the exact location, like maybe you're in Toronto, and then you can just put the latitude and longitude for that specific location. And then we're going to also grab the API key. This API key, it's going to be unique to yourself, so you want to make sure that you set up your own account. So what we're going to have to do then is at the top there's going to be a way to log in. So you're going to have to create an account and log in, and then when you log in you'll have my API keys. So you can see here, I'm just hiding my keys behind this window, but on the left side here you'll get a bunch of numbers and symbols and letters, and then you can name it whatever you want. So you can just create a key, type in, we could type in weather, or we can type in, let's type in air pollution, and then we'll click generate, and then it'll show up here on in the list on the left side. And you can see here that the air pollution has been added to the list, and this is the one we're going to use. So on the left side you will see that there are some letters and numbers, and you're going to copy that entire API key. Don't use my key, use your own, but we'll copy it and then we'll paste it in our project. And then what we're going to do is, you could call this anything you want if you want, but when you're first setting this up, it could take up to 1 hour to activate this key. It could take longer, so don't worry if you're not able to grab the data right away when you're coding along with me, because it takes some time for OpenWeather to activate your API key. So I'm just going to go through what the structure of this application will look like. And you can see here we have a file folder structure. I just created a README file at the root of our project, just so I could show you what we're going to do. So we have our air pollution app. We're going to have model, resources, view models, and views. And let's see what else is there. And there is going to be inside views, there's going to be a components. So we have some different files in each of these folders. This one here, the .json, is essentially going to be some extra data that we will populate locally, so it will not come from the OpenWeather API, but we still will have some of the data coming from OpenWeather API, but we'll also put some locally as well, and we just want to separate it nicely, and I put it in a resource folder. And then we got some view model and also views. So let's first see what exactly is FVVM. So in order to do this, I'm just going to show you what I usually do when I don't understand something. So what I'm going to do here is in Deepseek, or you can use ChatGPT, let's just ask what it is. So what is FVVM for Swift? So let's see, what does it say? It says flow view model. So that's what it stands for. And I'm just going to put that there. It represents flow view model view. And we'll go back over here. So we have a flow. So flow, it manages navigation and app flow, coordinating between screens. So we won't do that for this app. So we could skip the flow part, but we are going to deal with the view model and the view. So here, the view model, it handles the business logic and state management. So view model handles business logic and state management, and it exposes data and actions to the view. And then if we look at the view, what does that stand for? It's responsible for UI rendering. So it's what we see visually. So we observe changes from the view model and updates accordingly. Okay. And why do we use it? It's better separation of concerns, right? So we have navigation logic is moved out of the view model, and easier testing, yes, that's true, and more scalable for complex apps. That's correct as well. And let's get into exactly how we're going to start setting up our project and follow this structure. Okay, so next thing, let's go back over here into our code and let's actually start setting everything up. So I'm going to start creating the folder structure that we set up, and let's create the new folder and we'll call models. We'll also, another folder, we can call it resources. And then another folder, we'll call it view models, and we want to make sure it's not like this. It has to all be lined up at the same level. So there we go. So we got model, resources, view model, and then we need views, our last one. Views. So make sure it's lined up properly like this. So air pollution is the root of our folder, and then we inside the root we have 4 folders and then those other files. And now let's start adding the files into it. So let's start with the easier one. I'm going to start with the resources. That's just the data, the static data that's not going to move. So I'm just going to create a empty file, and I'm going to call it pollution components.json. So remove that Swift at the end. and I'll say pollution components. And then here inside there, we're going to just copy some data. So here, I just copied over some data. We have our square brackets, which denotes that this is going to be a JSON file. It starts and ends with the bracket, the square brackets. And then inside we have the curly brace that groups each of the different sets of data. So you can see in each group it has the same key values, which are name, key, unit, and description, and it's repeated in each of these little groups. And the only thing that changes is the actual values. So this is the key and this is the value. So in the values, this is what makes each of them different. You can see here I put all of the different symbols and whatever the keys are with the units that we want to represent and showcase, and any type of description if we want to show that as well. And next thing we're going to do is let's set up our, air pollution app. Okay, so we got the air pollution app. Okay, that is the starter. But what we want is we want to make the content view. So what we're going to do inside our views, there's going to be another folder, a new folder inside there. There's going to be components, but inside the views, the first thing we want is we want the new file there, and we want it called content view.swift. Perfect. Okay, so we got our air pollution app. This one here, we do want to double check that we change this slightly. So in our air pollution app, we got the Swift UI, we got main pollution app, and then var body some scene. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up the window group. So window group, it's going to have the content view, and the content view is essentially another file that we will be setting up. So let me just So what we're going to do is this content view is going to be created right here inside of our views. It's outside the components, so it's along that same line there. And in the content view, this is where we're going to create the actual look and feel of the app. And in here, we're going to have to import Swift UI, and we'll make a struct content view, and I just push tab to autocomplete, and then in the view tab again, we do need the body some view. And what I'm also going to do is I have to set up the pollution view model. So I'll have a state object private var view model, and we're calling pollution view model. And because there's an error, it's because we interset our view model. I'm just going to create an empty file, and we're going to call that pollution view model .swift. And you can see here we got the pollution view model .swift, and this is where I'm just going to import Swift UI, import combine, import foundation, and class pollution view model. It'll be observable object. Okay, I'm just going to leave it like that for now. I'll come back to it later. I'm going to go back to the content view just to finish up the visual. And here we're going to, in the body, we're going to be adding some sort of navigation stack. So navigation stack. We're going to have a vertical layout. So we're going to have a V stack. And here will be header view. And then header view, because we're going to create a separate component there for header view. And let's create the header view first. So if I create that right below, so below this bracket, I will make a private. I'm going to make this private so no other files can access it. And I'll put a header view and then some view. And the text we will have, we could put Toronto, and then we could put dot font, dot title, dot padding. Okay, I'll put the padding as the bottom, dot bottom. There we go. And then here, invalid redeclaration of content view. So let's see what's going on there. I believe it's just because we have not finished just yet. Content view. So let's first finish this. We're going to have, so if the view model dot is loading, we'll put a loading view. Loading view. So let's create the loading view as well. So under that private that we just created, we're going to create another loading view. So private var loading view some view. Progress view. And it'll be dot padding. So if view model dot is loading, let's see, can't convert value of type binding subject to expected condition type bool. Okay, I think it's because we haven't set up our pollution view model and it's just waiting for some sort of structure to show up. So what I'm going to be doing, let's go to our pollution view model here, and in our pollution view model, let's set up all this other variables here. So we'll have at published var pollution data, pollution, okay, and then at published var is loading is equal to false. error manage error message. And I'm going to make this pollution component. You could put it directly in the square brackets because we're going to put in some sort of, we're going to have some sort of container here that will hold the pollution component, which is actually the, let's double check here. Pollution component. So this one is coming from the actual pollution component file. So if we go to our models, we have to create a file, and we're going to call it pollution component.swift. So now that we created this pollution component, what we're going to do is, let's set up the file. So we'll have to get import foundation, and then we'll have the struct for pollution component, codable, identifiable, and let ID. We're going to be using this thing called UUID. It's just going to provide a unique identifier, and then let name string, let key string. We're just setting up the different data types here, and let unit string, let description, and we'll have an enum for coding keys. So all the keys that we've set up here, we're setting up the coding key, and we could just put it as, we don't need the ID, but we could set it up like this, name, comma, key, just to we'll just set up like this to save a little bit of space. So we're creating a name, key, unit, and description. And then it says here, type pollution component does not conform to protocol decodable. So let's see what's wrong here. So we have codable, identifiable, UUID. Let's set up, I believe it's because of our pollution row we have not set up. So let me just double check here. Okay, so let's go in our components here. We're going to make a file. We'll call it pollution row. And here, this is where we're going to import Swift UI, struct pollution row view, and we'll have a let name string, let value, double, let unit string, and we'll have some sort of body, some view. Let's set up a H stack. So horizontal stack with the text name. Let's see what else was there to autocomplete. It was, I think we don't need that. We need font weight. And I'll put dot to bold. Spacer. Text string format, and then we'll format it with dot to f, so 2 decimal points, and we'll put that value. So we're just formatting it with the value inside there, and then we'll have a text unit, and then dot foreground color. We'll put dot gray. And what we could do is we could set up a preview provider if we want to run this directly in Xcode, so it doesn't have to run any of the other files. So we could put a struct pollution row previews, so preview provider, static var previews, some view, and then pollution layout, pollution row, and we will put just to test it out, it'll have some CO, value of number 201.94, string, I could just put any type of units, I'll just copy it over. And there we go, so we have some sort of units at least there. This is just a preview if we do decide to use it. And dot preview layout, we'll put dot size that fits, and then dot padding. So here we got our pollution row, and this is just gonna help out how it's gonna look horizontally. But we still have quite a bit more to fix, so let me just save. You can see that error disappeared now, and we just have invalid redeclaration of content view. So let's see what is wrong. We got our struct content view. It's because we have our content view here already, which we don't need anymore, so I could delete that. You only need one, you should only have one content view, so it could start viewing the application. And that error is gone. Let's see, where's the other errors? So here, pollution data, cannot find the pollution data. So we need to have in our models another file, and we're going to call this air pollution data. So here we're going to then import the foundation, and we're going to have some sort of structures that we have to set up. So we got the air pollution response, the coordinates, because we're going to have to use longitude and latitude. and we're going to be setting up the pollution data. So the pollution data will also come with some components here. So there we go. You can pause the video if you want to take a longer time to look through it. For now, this is enough. And what I've done here is I have just set that up for us. Okay, there we go. So we have the different types of codable, different types of pollutions that we're going to be grabbing from OpenWeather API. And this pollution data is what is coming from here. So it's referencing that we're going to have some sort of data that we're grabbing, we're putting it in some sort of list that we're going to be using somewhere else. So this pollution, air pollution response, codable. If we look at codable, there we go. So we're going to be using codable, which contains coordinates and a list of information. So codable, let me just save this file. So type pollution component does not conform to protocol decodable. Did you mean to use equal? So let's see if we're missing something here. This is pollution component. And let ID is equal to. There we go. So this is the one that just has the equal sign. That's why I'm getting this error. So let me that's actually interesting that we have an equal sign there. So let me go to Deepseek and ask, why do we have ID equals UUID instead of that? So whenever you're stuck, it's great using ChatGPT or Deepseek just to help explain a few things, because it's sometimes hard to know right off the top of your head what's going on. So your pollution component struct, you're defining ID property as a const let with a default value UUID, rather than declaring a stored property with type annotation. Okay. So automatically generates a new UUID every time a new instance of pollution component is created. So no need to pass ID during initialization. Okay, it's because this is already creating something unique, and we do not need to pass anything over to update it. Works well with identifiable. Okay, I see. So this works with identifiable. And then the codable, I'm assuming, would be that portion. So codable, if I go here, codable is the coordinates and the pollution data. So yes, that should be that pollution data. And if I go to pollution data, it's using codable, and codable is just the information we want, the name, key, unit, and description. Okay, and we're grabbing the pollution component, which is letting us know what values are coming from each of these different elements that are coming from the API. Perfect. Alright, so now that we have that set up, we got our air pollution data done, we got our pollution component all set up, and then the pollutions component in our resources set up. Let's see, pollution view model, we need to set the rest of this up because we still need to add our API key. So we'll do private let API key, and we're doing camel case for this, and we're going to be setting this up just like that. And then we'll have a private var cancel labels, set any cancelable, set any cancelable. So this is capital. Let me just double check. What does any cancelable mean? What does any cancelable mean? So some sort of structure, some sort of units that we're following, but any cancelable is any type provided by Apple's combined framework that manages the life cycle subscription to publisher. Without any cancelable, subscriptions would stay active indefinitely, causing memory leaks or unwanted side effects. So it allows it to cancel it later, stopping the updates. Automatically cancels when any cancelable instance is deallocated when parent object is destroyed. Okay, so it looks like it's just something we set up initially, and then cancelables, we store it inside there. Inside here, we're setting it, and then once it's done setting it, then it cancels the subscription to deallocate it. And just so we're on the same page, what does deallocation mean? So it's just any cancelable, make sure whatever is set inside it deallocates later, and deallocation refers to a process of freeing up memory allocated in an object when no longer needed. Okay, so once it's done, it could just remove data if it's not needed anymore. Okay, perfect. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up some sort of coordinates. So we'll have, let's put Toronto coordinates, private latitude, and then private lon. So let's first find some sort of coordinates. Okay. Toronto latitude and longitude. Okay, so here we got some coordinates for Toronto. Let's copy this over. So we got 43.65, that's enough. And then the other one is 79.38. Perfect. I guess we could put the whole thing if we want. It's up to you how many digits you really want there, or decimal places. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to initialize this project right away when it runs, and it'll load pollution components. It will load it. So under here, let's add load pollution components. So I'll put private func load pollution components, and then what we're going to do is we're going to, based on our JSON file that we've set up, we're going to be loading this first. We're going to look through and parse the file in order to grab the information. pollution components with extension, and we're going to say we're going to be grabbing the data from the .json file that we've set up, and I'll put a comma, let data equals, so we're going to try to grab the data, and that data will grab the contents of the URL. Else, if it's not able to grab the contents, we'll just print failed to load pollution components .json. Okay, so maybe the data was not set up properly in the proper structure, and then we'll just return afterwards. Great. Now what we'll do is we want to do something. So once we are able to grab the data, then we will do something. And we can catch it if we need to. So we'll print if there's an error decoding pollution components, and we'll just /error, so we'll put it directly in the sentence there. Catch block is unreachable because no errors are thrown in do block, right? So we're not done the do yet. So here, got some notes here, I'll just copy and paste it over in the do block. Just trying to undo this. Okay, so here I'm just copying the notes over, and what we're doing is we're trying to send that JSON decoder. It converts the JSON file to Swift readable object, and then it'll convert that pollution. Make sure that pollution component self, it converts a JSON to an array that is set up with pollution components object, and the data is just the raw JSON data loaded from the file, and try is required because it's just decoding the fail. So we'll do pollution components and then equal to try JSON decoder, decode, and what we're going to have is we're going to have some sort of pollution component. And I'll make that lowercase data, because this data is what's coming from here. It's going to try calling that contents in the JSON file. It's going to convert it, and then we're just decoding it here, so then we can use that pollutions component. So what we're going to do is whenever we call it, it will call that pollutions component. When it calls that pollutions component, it will save that data, so it updates that variable, and it's being placed in this. Let me see what the right terminology for this is. So just want to know if there's a specific word to this at published, okay, term property wrapper for our pollution component, okay. So term property declaration, it's a mutable property of any of type array. Okay, so it's mutable. Term default initialization, empty array is assigned as initial value, right? So initially it's just going to be empty, and then what we're going to do is we're going to populate that data that we're grabbing from our .json file, and that's going to be populated into our empty array. So now we can use this pollutions component variable somewhere in our project, but first we need to grab our API key. So make sure you grab your API key. It'll be right there in the OpenWeather API. Make sure you copy it, and then we're going to go back over here and we're going to paste it. So just remember, you should grab your own API key. Don't just use mine here because I'm going to deactivate it later. And what we're going to be doing now is we want to also set up a few more things here. We have to set up the fetch pollution data. So under here, under init, let's set up the function of fetch pollution data. So spelled that wrong there. There we go, without the T there. Is loading equals to true, and then error message is equal to NIL, and then let URL string is equal to. So here, this is where we have to use the documentation URL. So here where we went to all these APIs here, we'll go back to our air pollution API, go to the API docs, and then down here you'll see the URL that we need to use. We're going to copy this URL, and we're just going to paste this URL right here. And because we want some values that we're going to be putting into this string, we have to change this from with the backslash and then not curly brackets, but rounded brackets. API, make that camel case. There we go. So we got latitude, longitude. The latitude is what we set up here. Longitude is what we set up here. API key is what we have here. We have it private, can't use it anywhere else. There's actually better places you should put this API key, definitely not in your project like this, but for now it's going to be okay. Let's continue this way, and that looks good. So now let's add the rest of this. Guard let URL. We'll have some sort of URL with a string, and we're going to have a URL string, so we're grabbing that URL string that we set up. If we're unable to grab anything, then we'll set up an error message, and it'll say invalid URL is loading is equal to false, and then it will return, and it'll just end. And then right down here as well, under the guard, we need to have a URL session.shared.data task publisher for URL .try map. I'll put out output in. So we're going to loop through a few things here, and we'll have a guard. Let response equals to output dot response as HTTP URL response dot status code. So if everything is okay with 200, else it will throw URL error dot bad server response. So it's going to check to see. So dot try map. See URL session dot shared. Okay, let's see. Results for try map is unused. Right, okay, because we're not done yet. So we'll want to return output dot data. So as long as everything is okay, that's great. It'll just double check, and then it will return the output dot, so output whatever the response is that's coming from this URL. So the response should, let's actually take a look at this. We can actually grab this, put it into our browser, and then let's just plug in the values directly. So I'm just replacing the longitude and latitude values, and then I'm going to add my API key to that end here. Enter. Okay, nice. So we have to use that word output.response because, and we have to use guard-let response, output.response. Right, because it seems like the way the data is set up on their end, it's using the words, the way the data is set up in OpenWeather API, it's using output.response. So it'll be output.response, and then it'll show this entire data. So that's why we set it up in this way. And the errors still exist because we're not done setting up the try map. So let's put dot decode type air pollution dot self, and then decoder will be the JSON decoder, and then dot receive on dispatch queue main dot sync. We'll have weak self. That's interesting. Completion in self is loading is equal false. Switch completion curly brackets case dot finished break. Okay, we're just checking to see when things are finished, and then we'll have a case dot failure let error, and then self dot error message equals error localized description. Okay, that looks good. Let's see what's going on here. We got some errors. Receive on requires type any error. Okay, so we are probably missing something. Decode, receive, sync. It's loading. Alright, I was just missing another bracket right there. Okay. And what's wrong with dot sync? Maybe it's not missing a bracket. Let's take it out. Let me just double check if I replace this. Cannot find cancellables. So I think, okay, so cancellables has to be lowercase l, cancellables, so it should be spelled like that. And then we got cancellables right here. This one looks actually very, very confusing. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this over into Deepseek and I'll ask it to explain this. So I understand the first part, we're grabbing the response, checking, make sure we're able to connect to it and grab the data. And this part needs a little more explanation. Okay, so let's take a look here. So it says that, okay, decode type air pollution self. Okay, so that part right there converts the raw data into Swift model. Air pollution response, okay. Conform to decodable. And then receive on. Ensures the next operations UI updates run on the main thread. And sync subscribes to the publisher and handles the result. So calls when the publisher finishes or fails. On success, it'll finish. In failure, it'll set a message and then receive value called the decoded air pollution response and update the pollution data with the first item in response list. Okay, so then it'll just grab all of the data when it's able to connect, which is this data. It's going to grab all of this and it'll just store it. It'll just be storing it. Updates pollution data. Okay, so it'll go to the pollution data, which is right there, and it's going to store that pollution data right there in that variable. And weak self prevents retaining cycles, avoids memory leaks. Okay, prevents retaining cycles. Let me just explain what this means in more detail. And then .store in cancellables stores the subscription in a set any cancelable to manage its life cycle. Okay. Weak self is capture list used to disclose sync and combine to prevent retain cycle. ensures it's captured in a weak reference instead of a strong reference. Preventing ARC from deallocating either. Okay, so if there's some sort of strong reference, it will try to prevent, it will retain, a retain cycle occurs. Weak fixes this by making the reference to self optional and weak. If self is deallocated, self becomes nil and the closure won't keep it alive. So self is deallocated. Okay. Okay, interesting. So what we're going to do now is, I believe we set up everything in this file. Let me just double check here. Load pollution components. Okay, so we just need one more thing here, and that is a function for get value for key string, and we'll have a double guard let components pollution data dot components, and then else it will return 0, so end. So we're going to check to see if we can grab the pollution data components, and we'll set up a switch key. So based on the key, we can set up the cases. So I'm just going to copy and paste it because there's quite a few here. So all these cases, we'll return it. There we go. So we have all these cases for different types of components, and the population data dot component. So if we go into our population data, I'm just clicking on the word and then holding command click in order to go into those areas. And actually, let me go back. If I click those arrows, so it's using component.co, component.no. So when I click, hold command and click, and then here hold command. Actually, it's using the pollution data, but we want pollution view model. Okay. Pollution view model. Okay. So it's going to be using the pollution data. Pollution view model. And this view model right. So this pollution data is going into this structure here, which is then using this pollution component, and this pollution component has all those C, NO, NO2, and we're just describing what the data type is for this. And what we can do now is let's go to another file. So let's go to the pollution row, double check, make sure we have everything. Okay, that looks good. Content view. So for the content view, we just have to add some if statements. So in here, we're going to also add an else for the errors, if there are any. And cannot find error view. So I believe we just have to set up the error view down below. So at the bottom, before the last bracket, we can set up a private var error view. So it's going to be using some sort of string. We're setting up the view, and if there is an error, we're going to set up a vertical stack. It will have it in red, and it'll just say try again. And it'll just try to fetch the pollution data again. Yeah, I'll just try to call this API again. That's why we're calling viewModel dot. And because we have the viewModel imported here at the top here. And what we're going to do is this pollution data view model, or pollution data view, we have to set up as well. And I'm just going to copy that part, and this is just another so we got pollution data view, which will be setting up a view. So the vertical stack, we have JSON definitions, another vertical stack. So it's going to look at each of the components that is coming in, and it's pretty much looping through the data that's coming in from online. So we're going to have some sort of component name, some sort of value with the data components, and then component unit. And I believe this is actually data from pollution data. Description. So if we go to our pollution component, we have the key unit description name, key unit description name, value is different. So this one comes from the pollution row. Pollution row will take those things, and the value is just being formatted right based on the number that's given back to us. So it's coming from the data. Data is the API. It's coming from our components. So if we go into data pollution, we should have components, right? And here we're going to grab the values that are coming back from the API, and then we're going to display it here. And this is just setting up some sort of date just to capture what date it is currently. And we can also set up some sort of, underneath here, we'll set up a get value as well, because here we're getting some sort of value. We setting up the keys as string from the components pollution data.components, right? And it's just going to see whatever values come back, if it's CO or NO. So CO will then return whatever components has. So if we go into here, CO is a double, so it will return that double information for the CO. The CO is right here. It's referring to this component's CO that it wants to grab from the API, and it'll return it. And then we want to set up the empty state view. Empty state view, because we have it somewhere up here. Empty state view if nothing shows up. And then we just need the refresh button at the bottom. If nothing is showing up, the user needs to refresh the page. I'm just fixing some of the indenting here. And here we got the refresh button. So the button, it's fetching the data. It's going to call that fetch pollution data, so just recall it again to hopefully trigger that URL to grab the data. And it's just a button that's saying refresh data for the user to click. And then if we need some sort of preview structure for running it on our app, we could set that up as well. Previews, preview some view, or previewing the content if it works. So let's double check if there's any errors, and I'm gonna double save here all of the files, make sure no errors show up anywhere. Save. Okay, so now it looks like we have no errors, but for the final test, let's just run this app. Build succeeded. Okay, let's see if this starts up our app. If it works, then it's great. If not, then we're going to have to figure out what's going on, if there's any errors. Oh, okay, so it looks like it's empty, right? So it says tap the button. So if there's an empty state, so we haven't grabbed anything yet, it means we haven't triggered the API call yet. So it's saying that we can, if we push the button, remember that when we push the button, that it will call that fetch pollution data. So we click it. Oh, resource cannot be loaded because app transport security policy requires secure connection. All right. So let's double check. Did we spell something wrong? Pollution view model. Here, something here was not set up correctly, so let us check. This is pollution view model. Okay, so we got is loading true, error message, NIL, URL, HTTPS. This should have a S at the end of it. 2.5 air pollution. Okay, let me just save and rerun it. It might have just been this secure S. refresh. Oh, nice. Okay. So just make sure you spell this correctly with HTTPS. It's to allow the mobile app to grab the information from the API. And you can see here we got all of those elements on the left. And then we have Toronto at the top. We got the units, which are coming from our API call, which are these numbers. And these actual units here on the far right, remember these are all coming from the local data that we set up. And then here's just the date that we set up in our content view, I believe. Yes, it's the date time. We're just formatting it this way. There's many other ways you could format it if you either Google it or ask ChatGPT, but this is good enough. So hopefully this is a good introduction to how you can set up your APIs and how you could grab the data and how you can make your own data as well, and organizing your code in